It's great to have you here. We'll just get going. It's 12 o'clock in Toronto. So we're going to start. My name is Michael Kerman with Leading Edge Seminars. And thank you for joining us today for our virtual lunch together with Janina Fisher. Um, we've been doing these virtual lunches since last March, and Janina was one of our first guests. And we really like the opportunity to all be together kind of in this community. There'll be plenty of time for you to ask questions. We may not get to them all, but I'll tell you a little bit about that in a while. What I like to do is just start off is to tell you what's coming up. We have new and breaking news and different things happening, and we use this as an opportunity to let you know. First, June is a busy month for us. We have really two of the leaders in thinking about and treating trauma. The next 3 days, we're going to have Babette Rothschild, who's also written a new book. Of course, she's known for her work on somatic treatment of trauma. Janina will be with us on June 17th, actually, for a workshop on treatment-resistant depression. We'll hear a little bit more about that. We have some practical programs on legal issues, what you need to know about consent and report writing, all that stuff, with a very entertaining lawyer presenting on that. And we have a town hall, which is another one of our free events where people get together on a screen like this and kind of talk about what's up. So lots of things being offered. And what we're going to do is, when this is all over, you're going to get a link with a copy of the video if you'd like to see it again, and a separate code for a 10% discount for anything we are offering this month. We're also going to be announcing something very, very special later this month. A first time we've ever offered 4 weeks of very wonderful workshops in Cancun in February 2021. Janina will be leading one of those weeks along with people like Bessel van der Kolk and Frank Anderson and Diana Fosha, and the list goes on. And it's an opportunity to be at a workshop with a great person for half a day, and the rest of the time be with other great people at a fantastic, beautiful resort just south of Cancun. So we can't give you all the information. We have a website that has a little bit, but the end of the month, we'll have a full website with everything you might want to know if you're interested in joining us in Cancun for the month, anytime the month of February 2022. Okay, that's kind of the plugs of what we're doing. So let's get on to today. First, what you need to know is that our hostess with the mostest, that's the official title, is Emily Porter. And she's on your screen if you have her on your screen. And she's there for you and for Janina. So if you have any questions for Janina, you can put them in the chat line. There'll be other opportunities as well to ask. If you have any problems technically or anything else, put them in the chat line. And Emily also sometimes puts in the resources. People mention something in like Janina's new book or whatever. We'll put those in the chat line as well. So that's the housekeeping. Now, I'm very happy to welcome back to our screen Janina Fisher, who is known for expertise both as a therapist and as a consultant. I have a lot of information about all her illustrious past, but I'm going to forgo that because you can check her website out. She's done a lot of very, very interesting work with interesting people and been a real leader in the field. Her latest book is Transforming the Living Legacy of Trauma, a workbook for survivors and therapists. And of course, she lectures internationally. She's not as on many planes as she used to be, and we'll talk about that. And she's really known for talking about topics that are relevant for therapists. I think what gets me, and just thinking about this introduction, is that in a couple of weeks, she's doing this workshop for us on treatment-resistant depression. And in Cancun, it's on trauma-related resistance and stuckness, which is what it says to me is like Janina listens to what the issues are for therapists and for clients and where we get stuck, and tries to come up with some solutions and ways, fresh thinking to help therapists do what is a very, very difficult job of helping people change stuck patterns and habits. So she even once did a workshop for us on errors in therapy. I don't know if you remember that, Janina. That was quite a while ago in Toronto, because Janina came to Toronto many times in the old days when people sat in rooms together before they looked at each other on a screen. So Janina, welcome very much. to this little gathering with some of your closest friends from around the world.
It's lovely. It's lovely. I think this was such a great pandemic tradition for you to organize. And even though it's breakfast for me, it's it's that whole idea that we're just getting together um, in our little cocoons and actually able to connect and talk and enjoy each other.
So maybe we'll start off just talking about, the last year since, or more, since this all started with the pandemic. What it's been like for you personally, and some of this, what you've learned about the world of therapy over the last year. What can you share with us, both personally and professionally, what some of the learnings have been?
I feel like there's so many. It's certainly changed my perspective. I wake up every morning just so pleased that my health is good, that I haven't gotten the virus, and everything else, it doesn't matter, which would not have been. I mean, I'm not a highly anxious person, but I wouldn't have been grateful for merely waking up feeling reasonably healthy. And it's made me appreciate my family, and I've actually loved getting together with friends on Zoom. We've been doing wine and cheese Zoom meetings, uh, and I've been in touch with friends that I haven't seen in years and years. Because in a pandemic, you start to worry: are these people that I've lost touch with, are they all right? Are they healthy? Uh, is their family okay? So I feel like, in a strange way, it's brought us together. A very strange way,
Mhm.
not a way we would have asked for.
Now, how do you think it's going to affect your life in the future? Have you made any resolutions about when the world returns to something that's more normal, what your life might look like and how it might be different?
Well, I was beginning to feel that my life was, I remember having this conversation with Dick Schwartz, the developer of internal family systems. And we were both agreeing, look at this. All of our dreams, professional dreams, came true. And it's a nightmare because we're never home. We go from airplane to airplane, airport to airport, hotel to hotel. Once in a while, we get to go home for a couple of weeks, then we're back on the road. And it was not a healthy human way to live. My family, my grandchildren especially, did not like the fact that they had a grandmother that they never saw. And so this has totally changed my perspective, because we don't have to travel to be in community and to teach what we're passionate about. So I can't imagine going out on the road 9 months a year as I was doing before all this happened. I was in the middle of a 6-week trip when the virus closed the United States. And so I just had to stop and fly home, and have not set foot on an airplane since.
What do there's been discussion starting more and more about what therapists' life, especially therapists in private practice life, will be like when office visits will be allowed. People are talking about, well, do they keep their office? They have a hybrid practice. Any thoughts about what the future of therapy might look like, down the road when things are more open and that's possible?
It's very interesting. I don't know if all of you have found the same thing. There are many clients who've decided that they prefer to do virtual therapy. Many trauma survivors feel safer because there's this distance. They're not trapped in a room with another human being. Some appreciate the fact that they don't have to travel. and worry about parking and all those kinds of things. Of course, some clients beg for a renewal of office visits. So I'm going to get a lot of my colleagues and friends have given up their offices. And I'm going to give up mine only because I'm trying to retire. I've been trying to retire from practice for about 3 years, not very successfully. So I thought if I gave up my office, that at least would be a step in the right direction.
So I want to roll back and I'll go to do a little memory lane time, because some people know you very well. Some people might be new to your work. And I know you were a therapist, and back in the 80s, I heard you talk about hearing a lecture with Judith Lewis Herman. So just tell us a little about where you were and your understanding of what therapy was all about, and some of those progressions. This could take the rest of the week. So this would be the Reader's Digest version of how Janina Fisher started out, and you pivoted and have continued to pivot it in your practice.
Well, I was very, very blessed. I was actually a mid-career therapist. I started graduate school at the age of 40. And in 1989, I heard Judith Herman speak. And remember, back in the 80s, a Freudian way of understanding people was still the dominant way. And I remember she said these words that I've never forgotten. She said, "Doesn't it make more sense that people suffer because real things have happened to them, rather than that they suffer from their infantile fantasies?" And I remember light bulbs were going off in my head, and I thought, she is right. This is the way I have to go. This is going to be my field. And then I was blessed to be able to do a postdoctoral fellowship with her in 1991 till 94. And then through a series of coincidences, I met Bessel van der Kolk socially, and he started saying, you should come to the trauma center. So in 1995, I became a supervisor and an instructor at his center, just as the neuroscience revolution was beginning. So we were just at the very, very start of understanding trauma the way we understand it today. And it was very exciting. It really felt, well, we were pioneers. So we felt like pioneers trying to figure out, how do you treat trauma? Because talking about it is clearly not enough. How do we understand why it's different from other very distressing, painful life experiences? And it was a brave new world, and very meaningful to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think I've heard you speak before about working with Bessel van der Kolk at the trauma center and winging it, like learning as you were going along about what this is all about. It wasn't just a neat progression of like the layers of the onion. So
Right.
do you remember how any of those insights, or did things happen by watching cases or being at a case conference together? Do you remember any particular moments where a light bulb went off and said, maybe we need to go in this direction and working with people with trauma?
I think what the biggest change was Bessel's "The Body Keeps the Score," which at the time seemed totally nuts. And people would warn me, he's a dangerous man. He must be psychotic to have these very strange ideas. And then, of course, he did the research to prove that he was right. And so that completely, it changed what we were doing. We were doing talking therapy with everything we could figure out creatively to add to it. A little CBT here, a little creative arts there, we went toward more organized approaches that understood that the effects of trauma were not just emotional effects, they were effects on the brain and the nervous system. And we had to figure out a way to talk to people and try to work with their brains and their nervous systems.
A lot was coming out in neuroscience, and you've spoken a little bit about, I was curious, the neurobiological waltz. Can you tell us what that waltz is about and how to help therapists understand
Right.
science and their work?
The neurobiological waltz was the term, I think, I can't remember if I invented it or someone invented it, and I used it to describe the therapeutic relationship between therapist and trauma survivor. Because as you know, I'm preaching to the converted here because you all know this, that the therapeutic relationship with trauma survivors is often very complex, can be very tumultuous, very challenging. And to understand it as not as a good therapist with a difficult client, not that that wasn't also true, but to understand it as a dyadic dance, as Alan Shore calls it, where we're taking a step forward and the client is either stepping on our toes or stepping away from us. And then we take a step and maybe we step on their toes. And it's getting our ability to function as an organized dancing team that makes the difference. So that was a fun workshop to do, to really talk about, and also to talk about something we rarely get to talk about, which is what do we feel when the client steps on our toes? And what it's like when we're thrown off or we're triggered or we're discombobulated by these dynamics, which normally, in the history of the 40 years I've been in the field, we rarely talk about the mutual impact of therapist and client upon each other than in the psychoanalytic world.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'll throw it out for when we open up the questions. If anyone would like to weigh in on that, anyone watching today, that would be interesting. But since we're talking about trauma, tell us about your new book and what that's about. You've written a lot, you presented about a lot, and what is this book? How does this book add to our understanding?
This book actually has been growing in my mind for many, many years. It came out of the instruction of Judith Herman back in the late 80s, early 90s, to educate clients about trauma. She is a political feminist who believes that the therapist, as holder of all the theoretical information, further imbalances the power differential that already exists. And the way to create a more equal relationship would be to share what we understand about trauma and ask the client, how does this apply to you? And it was a wonderful way to work. I remember as a postdoctoral fellow, you have to do what your supervisor tells you to do. And I found that clients responded so positively to having their symptoms normalized, to even having their extreme reactions understood. And so I developed all these ways of explaining what was happening, including diagrams, because so often, as we know now, when individuals are traumatically activated, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. And so the ability to take in new information gets really compromised. And I found that if I made a simple diagram of what I was trying to explain, it was like it woke people up. Even those clients who were in that very shut down place, kind of barely breathing, they would look up, they would focus on the diagrams, and they would start to engage more. So I've been thinking about this workbook to incorporate the diagrams and how the information about trauma can have a healing as well as a supportive effect. And so far the reaction has been very, very positive. It's exciting to hear. One thing about the new world of email is you get lots of emails about how your book affects people from clients, and it's just lovely.
Does it build on you developed a chart that I know therapists like to use? I think Caversham booksellers here were involved with you. Does it build on that or incorporate some of that?
So the psychoeducational flip chart, which is distributed in Canada by Caversham, has the diagrams without the explanation. And many therapists said to me, I love working with the flip chart. My clients like it, but I'd really like to know more about the information underneath these diagrams, because sometimes I feel like the client and I are trying to figure it out together, rather than the therapist already knows what the diagram means. So I've been thinking about the workbook in that sense too, for therapists to feel comfortable in this whole arena of neuroscience.
Okay. Well, I have one more question, then we're going to open it up and we can follow up any of the things we've been talking about. Your webinar with us is on treatment-resistant depression. So I'd like to think there must be a continuum in how you see that. What depression isn't so treatment resistant, and what do you, and how do you, and what is, and how you see some of the signs? Now you might be talking about this in the webinar, but what are some thoughts, general ideas about how to know the difference between treatment resistant and depression that you can say, yes, I think I can work with this person?
Well, I think depression is one of those words that stands for so many things. Right? So we have people who come to us with situational depressions. There are people who come to us with biological depressions who have an immediate positive response to antidepressants, and they feel like they're the person they used to be. That's a small percentage. And then we have the clients who have a history of trauma and long-term depression. We have some clients even without histories of trauma with long-term depressions, and you all know them because they're the ones who say, yes, I've been depressed for the last 20 years. I've been depressed for about 10 years. And I've tried this medication and this type of therapy, and it's been recommended that I do a group, but nothing seems to help. And you were quite right, Michael, that, I like to find topics that really are meaningful to therapists. And it was because I had a treatment resistant depressed client that I started becoming curious about, okay, situational depression responds well to therapy. Biological depressions respond well to medication. What's different about these treatment-resistant depressions, and what do we have to do differently? So it was fun to develop, very, very relevant for me and hopefully for all of you.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, I'd like to open this up. If you have a question, put it in the chat line. Emily will be our moderator. And when you come on the screen, if you're not just writing, you'd like to come ask Janina, and it's great to see faces, just let us know where you're from. This is always fun to find that out as well. Emily, what do we got?
Right, we have a couple of questions asked prior, and then we'll get in, and I'm keeping a list to make sure we're staying in order. So the first question was an email, and it asked, what is the best practices approach when working with someone in a job situation who has been impacted by something you have said or done, but you have no idea what it is, and where the individual is traumatized and has become hostile in all communication, but will not communicate with you about what you did to provoke them so much?
Wow, that's a tough one. Thanks for starting with the easy question.
Absolutely.
Well, I think what I would do, and what I've done with clients certainly, is to say, I clearly have done something very triggering or very offensive or both. And I just want to tell you how sorry I am. I think the other thing that always I find helpful is if I validate the other person's defense. So I say, I see that you're keeping your distance. I appreciate that you don't want to talk to me and that you need to protect yourself. And that's first and foremost, of course. If you ever feel that you could write me or email me or let me know what I've done that's been so harmful to you, I would really appreciate that. But first and foremost is you're protecting yourself.
Okay.
So I just find that if you validate the other person, it really helps rebuild the trust.
Thank you. Our next anonymous question was how to, or if to, approach the reality that a neighbor is very disassociated without any awareness or treatment. We aren't overly close, but neighborly.
Wow, that's hard. There's an easy scenario to trigger or offend the other person, right? Right. So I don't know that with a neighbor, unless the dissociativeness is impacting me, I don't know how I would feel I had grounds for saying something, unless the neighbor and I were very close, and he had acknowledged that there was some struggle going on. So I would probably not try to share it unless I was worried about the neighbor.
I work with schizophrenic inpatients and find it disheartening and seemingly impossible to help. Any words of encouragement?
Oh, it's so hard. You know, one of the most encouraging pieces of information that's crossed my path is the incredible percentage of people with diagnoses of schizophrenia who have histories of trauma. So the research is very much like the research on trauma and borderline personality. Very, very stunningly high correlations, like 80% have histories of trauma. In the Netherlands, there's research looking at if you treat the trauma in schizophrenic clients, do they improve? And in the Netherlands, they have. They've had wonderful, wonderful results. The other thing that I like to do is to try to enter the world of the schizophrenic, and try and try to understand the world. One of the ideas that came from the Netherlands group was that delusions may be a way of binding anxiety. And so if we look at the delusion as a solution or an explanation for anxiety, does that tell us something different? So I really like people with psychoses. Maybe I'm a small percentage, but I think the thing that's heartbreaking when you're working with them day in and day out is this sense of we don't have treatment approaches that lead to much hope for this population. And that's where I would use psychoeducation about trauma, even psychoeducation about psychoses. I remember I worked with a schizophrenic client in an inpatient setting whose therapist had developed what I call an index card therapy approach. This client used to carry a stack of little index cards in her shirt pocket. And the cards said things like, remember, voices are just a symptom of schizophrenia. Remember, you don't have to do what the voices say. And she would read and reread and reread these little cards to keep her mind from torturing her to the point of suicide. And it was very effective. She just needed the cards refreshed. So she would come up to me in the hallway and say, I need a new card, I need a new card. And it wouldn't say anything much different, but she would get such relief from reading them.
Our next question comes from Miriam. Miriam, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, sure.
Hi.
Hi. So my question, Janina, is you spoke a bit about using diagrams. So my question is, in trauma care, I understand the benefits of using diagrams and pictures to keep client within their window of tolerance. As you mentioned, you do in your practice. Have you found any strategies that you've used in this world of virtual care to enhance that?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, I have. I've been doing something I never thought to do. I've done something similar with smartphones in the past, but I've been making little 2-minute Zoom videos for clients, psychoeducational videos. Here are 4 things to do when you're feeling overwhelmed, right? So they're just, it's as if the client is sitting there in the room and I'm talking to the client. And I have one client who says she has watched her 2-minute video probably 100 times just to calm herself enough to feel like she can make it through the next hour. So it might be, here's, I might start a video by saying, if you're watching this, I am guessing that you're feeling overwhelmed, hopeless, et cetera, et cetera. And here's what I want you to do first. First, just take a moment to breathe, right? Right? And then try to find your feet. Can you still feel your feet on the ground? And just walk the client through just a few simple things to regulate the nervous system, calm the emotions, and put it all in perspective. And so that's fun. Now, I used to do something similar with smartphones when we were still, remember those ancient days when we were seeing people in person? Don't they seem long ago and far away? I would take a few minutes in a session to record something similar on their phones. And that was often a great help to people, especially people who can't seem to take away what they've learned in therapy. It's gone by the time they're halfway home. And you probably all know exactly what I mean by that.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Robert. Robert, are you there? Let's get you unmuted. Hi.
Yeah, you always mute me. You love that. That's a real power position to be in. And I'm 65, so I'm not used to people muting me. But I'm a child sexual abuse survivor. My recent incident was I was physically assaulted in 2010.
I'm so sorry.
And it's created neurological conditions. And I saw a geriatrician who said, well, you've never gotten over your trauma from being assaulted. And I said, well, wait, that was just an event. My trauma is coming from the neurological conditions that I've been dealing with, because 6 weeks after, I had a grand mal seizure. And so now I'm dealing with all that aftermath. It's got nothing to do with the event. The event was just something that happened. And I've been mindful about that when I work with clients, and sort of saying, I need to be careful not to jump to a conclusion that they've done that, because this person did that to me, and I shut them down. And I think the challenge is trying to tune in as best we can to the client's experience, and that requires listening, kindness, compassion, all that stuff. So how do you manage that when someone's obviously in trauma, they're describing their experience, and how do you sort that out so that you're in a place where you think, I'm getting close to getting it, but I need to explore further?
Well, I think you and I are in agreement that exploring the event is not the goal. It's exploring the effects of what has happened, whether it's something long-term like child abuse, or whether it's a single extremely traumatic event. And more, I find that perhaps maybe the medical professional is changing, because more and more head injuries, concussion is being diagnosed in survivors of assault, which is very important, as you are really saying loud and clear. The neurological effects are long-term effects, which means that the trauma goes on and on and on and on. Am I getting you right?
Oh yeah. I mean, during the pandemic, so since February 2020, I've had 35 falls within my 842 square foot unit.
Oh my goodness.
And one of them was, my best fall was, I had an appointment because I'm a registered social worker, so I could get a vaccine.
Oh.
And we went to get a vaccine, and I'm using a walker for safety. And I put my brakes on, and then, because the line was long, and I told my wife, I can't stand up this long. And then when the line started moving, I forgot that I put my brakes on.
Oh.
And they had these rubber things, because it was in a parking lot. And then I ended up going, "Burp." And all of a sudden, I found myself in first aid, and my wife was falling behind me. She identified as a primary caregiver, and we got our shots. And
Wow.
it's hard to describe those things to people, what that feels like. And so I've started seeing a therapist of mine who's a colleague, and I said, you know what it is? It's totally exhausting. When I get up in the morning, when I get up from my chair, I have to literally focus on point A and point B and not get defocused. Do you know how exhausting that is?
It's just
Mhm.
totally
It's
exhausting.
totally
And
exhausting.
and you have the ability to know what you need and to be consistent at this exhausting project, which many of our clients don't have. They don't have that information,
I
and they
agree.
don't have that sense of direction. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, Robert, because
You're welcome.
there's so many important things in what you're saying. Our field still tends to be very event focused rather than effect focused, so that as Robert is describing, the effects of even a single traumatic event can multiply in terms of their long-term effects, because the exhaustion can lead to depression. So luckily, Robert's aware of the difference between exhaustion and depression. Many of our clients are not. And so it's very important. It's one of my missions in the field that if I possibly can help the field to go from event focused to experience and effect focus, that is my long-term wish. So thanks again,
you.
Robert.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Tracy. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Hi,
Hi.
Janina. I
Hi.
have a question. I'm a therapist from Toronto, and I work with mostly children and youth who experience complex trauma. So your book has helped me so much. And I have this question about the structure of the talk about. It's mostly because, when I'm working with teenagers, I understand that part of kind of really need to evoke that normal lifestyle part. But at the same time, they're still teenagers. They're still developing. So I really want to hear your thoughts around how to balancing that, still honoring their developmental needs. And sometimes I feel so sad wanting to put all that responsibility on the normal lifestyle, because they're still young and they still need the care from their caregiving system. So I really want to hear that about that. How do you navigate that?
So Tracy's talking about this concept from my book, Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors, that we have what is called in the structural dissociation model a self that goes on with normal life no matter what. Every therapist knows this. We've been very good at going on with normal life in the midst of a pandemic, which is extraordinary. We all pivoted to be able to keep on keeping on. And so how to use that with teenagers, I think teenagers like feeling a sense of effectiveness, feeling a sense that we respect their intelligence and we respect their competence, because the environment is saying, you're not competent, you're going to screw it up, right? You have screwed it up. And so I find talking to that side of teenagers very empowering. And I don't see it as necessarily doesn't mean that I can't say, it's very hard to keep on keeping on without the support of a family, without the support of people to understand. I probably don't say take care of you to a teenager, because teenagers often get triggered by that kind of language. But I think I can acknowledge that it's hard to have to rely on yourself when they're still so young. So that's how I would handle it. And the thing that's hard is that when you come from an abusive, neglectful environment, the truth is that you are on your own, and your normal developmental needs for support have to be put on hold. That's just a reality often. And to get validated for that actually meets a developmental need. And the other day, my granddaughters were saying, who are 15 and 18, they were talking about how hard the pandemic's been on some of their friends. And they said, a lot of kids don't love their parents the way we do, which was their way of saying, not many parents get us and make it easy for us to love them the way our parents do. And I felt very happy for them and very sad for their friends who are quarantined with parents who don't understand them.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Barbara. Barbara, where are you from?
I am from Argentina. I live in Argentina now. I live in Argentina. Well, yes, I have a question. How do you consider the inherited depression? And this is something that interests me very much. My own mother has been a very depressive person. My father too, both my grandmothers too, for different reasons. All of them were from Poland. When I visited Poland many, many years ago, I was surprised to find that people there are, almost all of them, quite depressed. Their way of talking, it's like a sad song, So somehow Chopin is present in all of them. To say it somehow. And Oscar Wilde once said that he could commit suicide listening to Chopin. And I completely agree with him. That's true. And I found that in many people who live in other countries but come from Polish families. How do you view this? How do you consider this?
Well, I think there are multi-generational effects of trauma. And we see those. We certainly see the multi-generational effect on the Jewish people of centuries of persecution. We see the multi-generational effect of slavery in the Afro-American population. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if something similar was happening in Poland, because Poland too has had many, many years, decades, hundreds of years of trauma and deprivation. So I would think about, is there an intergenerational legacy? And it usually helps people to think of their depression or their traumatic responses as a multi-generational legacy, because it takes away the feeling of being damaged and defective. When you feel like you're the only person in the world experiencing depression, it's much more depressing than to think about it as an intergenerational burden. But it's certainly very, very sad and a legacy which needs reversing.
Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. We had a question from a clinician in Toronto. How do you make a clinical decision to end treatment or therapy with a depressive client who is resistant to treatment? How do you know when you are out of your skill set, burnt out, or you should continue to work with the client?
Right. Well, I think the thing that I always keep in mind is that if I feel that my skill set has been exhausted, probably that's the way every other therapist feels too, right? That it's not, that again, if we feel burned out, if we feel incompetent or inadequate to treat someone, it says something about us, but it also says something about the client. And so I tend, there have been a few clients in my 40-year practice whom I have terminated. The one I remember most clearly was the first one, a woman who tried to burn her family home down with her husband and children inside it. And I felt that was way beyond the scope of my ability to prevent a whole family from dying in a home fire. But generally with depression, it tends to make me think creatively. And if I start to feel burned out, what I try to do is I try to work less hard, because to me, burnout comes when we're trying to save the day and the client can't make the progress we need to feel that we're getting somewhere. So years ago, I made up a kind of commandment for myself. The client has a right to be stuck. It's not for me to say that clients shouldn't be stuck. And so if
Can I eat your pizza, hon?
if I'm burning myself out, this is welcome to the pandemic. Our entire lives are exposed to the world. So if I'm feeling burned out, I know it's because I'm trying too hard, I'm working too hard, and I need to relax. And I need to accept the client has a right to be stuck. And there's something about those words that just kind of gets my head straight, because I think, who am I to say this client should be making progress? It's, I'm simply here to facilitate change if change is possible. And then I try to get more creative, because when I'm creative, I don't feel this kind of weight on my shoulders. I try to use humor. I try to laugh and say, the two of us are doing the best we can, but this depression is winning the game. So, Janina and Bob, 10, right? Depression 99, right? We're just not winning this game. And so that it's me and the client against the depression. It's not me and the client against each other. So it can be hard. And I'm so lucky, because my very first job as a mental health professional was working with autistic children and adolescents. And I learned then to be pleased and really feel good about the tiniest possible increments of change. I mean, these were very low functioning, nonverbal, autistic children and adolescents. Couldn't make eye contact, couldn't have a conversation with them. And so progress might be that the client looked at me for 10 seconds. And so it's made me very relaxed about what I call the glacial pace of change.
Emily, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Our next question comes from W. Wilson. Are you there, and where are you from?
Yes, I'm from Virginia. Doctor, thank you so much. This has been very wonderful. My question that I have for today, I work for the military, and so one particular patient is coming to mind having complex trauma, childhood trauma, military sexual trauma, and domestic violence in relationships, marriages to be exact. And what brought her in this time for treatment was grief. Gave birth last year to, after multiple miscarriages, gave birth to a set of twins, and 5 days later, one of the twins died.
Oh.
And so complex, emoting all over the place, now has some physical symptoms that have come about as a result, and also now facing what we call in the military transition, is in review for medical board to be medically discharged from the military. After a 18 and a half year career, which she has prided herself on. But admits that she is unable to function in her current career position. But just any suggestions as to, I meet her where she is. We work on grounding. We work on working on the emotions and those kinds of things. We've been meeting for roughly about 3 months now, just now getting to being able to, for her to feel safe, to begin sharing some of those internal feelings rather than coming in each week with a different narrative. And so any suggestions to try to help this young lady?
You know, I don't mean to overly pat myself on the back here, but I actually think that my new book might be helpful to her.
Okay. I just purchased it, so I will recommend it. Thank you.
Because she's obviously very intelligent. She's got a good mind.
Yes.
But she's flooded with emotions and traumatic responses.
Okay.
And I'm very impressed if she can care for her remaining child. That's amazing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
My very best to her and to you.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Kim, are you there? Where are you from?
Hi, Janina.
Hi, Kim. I know you.
Yes, you do. So nice to see you. So my question is more of a general one. It's not a case specific. I'm just scrolling through. I wrote it down because I didn't want to miss any words. So while a lot of us as therapists are feeling overwhelmed with people wanting services, like, I went from a 3-month wait list to a 6-month wait list to no wait list because I just can't, right? And I know a lot of my colleagues are having the same thing. Well, at the same time, a lot of clients that I've been with for years doing SP work specifically, after about a year into the pandemic, they said, I just can't do this anymore. I'm really not feeling the connection that was so important in our work together. Let's be in touch when the pandemic is over. And I feel sad about that. But at the same time, I understand, right? Because they know what they need. So do you have any ideas on how to enhance that sense of connection on screen? Because I didn't do any on-screen work before the pandemic and really had to shift my practice. Now I'm, like most of us, crazy as heck online.
Right.
But
right.
I wonder if you have any ideas about how to just enhance, because right brain communication is not really happening with a 2D screen.
Mhm.
as well.
Although I think it can. So I actually think that I did I do this workshop for you, Michael, on making
Reading
virtual
connection at a
therapy?
distance.
Yeah. Because what I think we have to do is often not comfortable for us as therapists, but we, we do a lot for our clients, even though we're uncomfortable. We have to make our presences bigger. We have to laugh more, smile more, emote more, as it were. I don't mean to say break down anymore, but we think of it as you're an actor or actress, and you have to project to the second balcony, right? So as an actor or actress, you get good at that. You get good at making your presence bigger without being fake.
Okay.
And so I can't, in the office, I just became aware, wow, back in the ancient days when we saw people in person, I could nod slightly and that would have an impact on the client, or the client's body language would shift very subtly, or something in their energy would change. I could pick it up in the office. I can't always do that on screen. But if I make myself more of a presence, that really helps. And if I'm warmer, because that's a big thing that gets lost. You don't have to work very hard to be warm in an office setting, but you do have to work harder at it in the two-dimensional setting.
Yeah.
And those things I find being playful. I remember, I don't have it right now, but I often have a plastic water bottle on my workspace, and I have this one client who is always in crisis. Things are always falling apart in her life, and I would take my water bottle and I'd just bang my head with it very gently, and she would laugh, and it would break the tension. And now I think she almost is looking for that moment that I bring out the water bottle. Right. So it's making it more alive, because the screen makes you a little less alive. And what we need is to be more alive, because it's not clear when we're going to be able to work in person again. I mean, that's not, it's really sad to think, but it isn't clear. And all of us, of course, have different health statuses, right? Different risk factors to be concerned about. So I think we just have to make that two-dimensional space more and more fun. And since you work with kids, Kim, I mean, I'm amazed. My son is a child psychologist and also sensory motor psychotherapy trained, and he's working with 6-year-olds on Zoom. It's amazing.
I've got little ones right now. I'm not losing the kids. It's the adults that are saying I can't do this anymore. The kids love it.
Right, exactly. And I think one of the things I'm aware of is that clients have this, especially traumatized clients, have this belief that if we're not right there, 2 feet away, 3 feet away, that we don't care. And that really comes from their experience of adults who were right there who didn't care.
Yeah.
And so they're really looking for the restitution of an experience that is, it's like, it's really a memory, the longing for that sense of palpable contact.
Yeah.
But I actually think we're working harder to be there on Zoom.
Yes.
It's not, Anybody find Zoom easier than working in person?
We're seeing some hands, and I'm sorry to say our time is up, but this has
was
been
a
a very
whole-
alive hour plus, and I think it shows how Zoom can be very alive, and we can feel together in this kind of way. I've seen this a lot over the last year, and thank you so much, Janina. And I want to thank everyone in our little community today to be here. We'll continue our tradition of unmuting everybody. You can say your goodbyes and thank yous to everybody else, and then wish you all a good day wherever you are. So thanks
Yeah.
again.
Thank you.